No.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 14th episode of The Treat Show. 15th. So sorry. So joining me is OG Tyler in the studio. Good to have him back.
Yo.
And we have a very special guest today. So we've got AJ. Unfortunately, couldn't make it to the studio tonight, but he will be on the webcam live with us. AJ Sour Diesel. We're gonna pick his brains about his past and story.
Interview.
Oh, sorry, AJ.
Well, I'm excited for this. Am I muted?
You shouldn't be muted. Let me see if you're muted. I think you're good. You let me know.
All right.
So, OG Tyler,
Ma'am.
how does it feel to have such a good guest?
Oh, this is great. This is cannabis royalty right now. Like, you know, this is what you read about in books and things. So
This is what we've been waiting for.
yeah, this is awesome. Very happy.
So
Yeah, I mean, so let's just kind of break it down, like, you know, your early beginnings. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Manhattan, and I lived in the Bronx till I was about 4 years old. Then I lived in Yonkers for a few years, and then I guess when I was about 7 or 8 years old, my parents got divorced, so I spent divided my time up between living in New York City and Westchester. And then when I was about in my early elementary school years, we moved up to Fishkill. I lived there for a little while, and then we moved back down to Westchester. So for the first years of high school, I was in Westchester County, and then I got kicked out of high school and ended up in a boarding school in upstate New York. And from the time I graduated high school, I lived in Manhattan, and eventually moved to Brooklyn, and that's where I spent most of the Sour Diesel years, was living in Brooklyn.
Dang.
So, you know, to summarize, I've been around. The only constant home I ever really had was New York City, because we moved around a lot when I was a kid.
Right.
But we always had a place in New York City. So New York is where I went to after I graduated from high school, and I went out and found an apartment, and you know, started hustling, and then the story basically began.
Wow. When
Here.
when was your first experience with cannabis? Like, first time you ever smoked it?
Well, the first time I ever saw weed was I had an uncle who Uncle Steve, who was my mom's sister's husband, and he used to smoke weed. And my mom would often send me to. They lived in Massachusetts, and my mom would send me there for like a week. You know, to just, if I had a week off of school, sometimes she'd send me there just to, you know, get me out of her way. And I'd go spend time with my aunt. And Uncle Steve smoked weed, and he had a friend named Wayne, and they would smoke weed together. And they would often take me and like some of the neighborhood kids for these rides in the back of their pickup truck, and they would just drive like maniacs around like vacant lots, you know, trying to like knock us out of the back of the truck while they would be smoking weed in the cab. And so the first time I ever like noticed what weed was when I saw Uncle Steve and Wayne smoking weed, and I was probably about 8 years old at that time.
Dang.
And it was the same side of the family. I think it was Christmas 1982, when I was 9 years old, that I tried weed with an older cousin at basically at Christmas, and so that was my very first experience.
Was that something that freaked you out, or like were you into it at that point, or was it kind of
No,
like
I thought that being like a bad kid was really cool, so I was actually really impressed with myself that I got to like. I was like already smoking cigarettes and doing anything I could, setting things on fire and doing everything mischievous.
You
So yeah, so that was the first time, and then I didn't smoke again until I was 12 years old, um, and that was at a Bob Dylan concert at SPAC during summer camp with one of my counselors,
dang.
and then,
gosh.
and then again, didn't smoke again until I was about 14. So when I was 14 is when I really started smoking, but that was when I had when I gained access to weed so that I could get it all the time.
And is that just like from like people at school, or like older friends, or
Started off stealing it from my stepfather because he had some in this. He had a big bag of it in his freezer, and so I used to steal a little every weekend when I would visit, and so that became the source, and until I could find other places.
you had the little head stash at that time?
I feel like that's like with boarding school and traveling, like moving around a lot like that. My family was like that too, where we didn't stay like stationary very long. And I feel like it makes you a different kind of person though. Do you think, AJ, that like, I don't know, like you're
No, I
more,
think getting in trouble and being bad was also a way for me to make myself known, since I was always showing up into a new place. If you want to like lay me down on the therapist couch and try to figure me out, that's probably. I never really thought about this stuff, but I'm writing an autobiography right now, so it's like you're forced to like look in the mirror and be like, why am I like this? And so yeah, I have been coming up with some hypotheses on why I'm the way I am, and
you're
that probably had something to do with it.
you're currently working on this autobiography?
Yeah.
Gosh, that's impressive.
That is.
I I feel like has it been just like what you're touching on is like going through these like kind of experiences throughout life, and I think what defines us, like when you really start reflecting on it, was there some things that like was there anything that really stood out to you that like if you could share like one piece of what words of wisdom from kind of I don't know the things that you've been analyzing on like business or relationships, like a tip that we should all know.
I've gone to tips. Yeah, but well, think before you say things is probably the best advice I could have given my younger self. But I mean, yeah, there's so much I can say about like just it's a look in the mirror when you write a book, if you're going to write an autobiography, because it's either going to be a bullshit story where you just make yourself the hero in every situation, or it's going to be a real honest look at who you are and who you've been. And so I've tried to be as honest as possible. I might have to cut some things out, but yeah, and so it's heavy, like it's heavy to go, because everything that happened in the past is also extremely relevant in the present. You know,
Gosh.
way
So do
your
you remember?
personality and your life choices have been shaped.
Do you happen to like remember the first time whenever you saw like a branded weed, or like something with a name, you know?
Well, I started going to Amsterdam in 1992.
Oh,
So that was
dang.
probably the first time I saw weed normalized and, quasi. I mean, the bags were just written on with a Sharpie, but they were technically branded, and the coffee shops were branded.
Dang.
Even the coffee shop, like how did they sorry, how were they complementary to each other? As like the coffee shop and the cannabis strain? Or being able to smoke there? Is there like something that they would help each other with kind of with that?
Well, the coffee shops all had their logos, and so I guess that's where it kind of all started from there. I mean, if you look at what the branding of cannabis has turned into, it kind of all, you can trace it all back to Amsterdam, because that really was the first place that I know of where there were weed brands. The Bulldog, the Greenhouse, all these, the Sensi Seed, they all had great logos and stuff. Like it was impressive.
Did you go like fresh out of high school?
Yeah, as soon as I graduated high school, I convinced my parents. I lived in New York City, so I didn't need a car. So instead, they gave me like $6,000 to go take a 6 week or 8 week tour around Europe, and I had a Eurail pass, and
Dang.
went traveling around. And so I spent a good solid like 10 days of that time in Amsterdam, and probably would have spent the whole summer there, but the person I was traveling with wasn't enjoying it as much as me.
When you first landed there, like, was it what you had anticipated in your mind for it to like look like, or
Stood up
yeah.
because my sister had gone and told me about it, and she didn't even smoke weed, and she had told me, oh yeah, so then I started like hearing around from other people how you could just go and smoke weed in the coffee shops, and how it was really good weed and it was cheap. And so I kind of like had it already built up in my mind, but like nothing prepares you for like the first moment that you walk out of Central Station and into the insanity that's Amsterdam. There's that pipe organ thing playing, and people, street people doing juggling and doing weird shit, and sword swallowers, and you walk right smack into the thick of it as soon as you leave the station. So yeah, so I'll never forget that.
Did you know anyone, or did you just say, "Hey, I'm going. I'm just doing this"?
Yeah, I just said I'm going there.
Dang.
That's so brave. Honestly, like that's like the coolest thing I could ever imagine doing. But like that's so, I wouldn't have the courage to do that
No
at
cell
that
phone.
age. Yeah,
And just
completely
going.
new area.
My sister had brought me back a T-shirt from the Grasshopper, and so I knew the Grasshopper. And when you come out of Central Station, if you look to your left, there's like a big sign, Grasshopper. So the first thing I did, I had my backpack on, is I ran over to the Grasshopper, threw the bag down, and started buying weed and smoking, and I was there for about 2 hours.
Wow.
2 hours.
Dang. And did you meet like any people in that trip that were people that you then again like have relationships with now, or was it just
No.
kind of like just a more of like a tourist type thing?
Well, I loaded up on weed, so then I pretty much made friends with all the weed and hash I had as I traveled around the rest of the world. And so I met a lot of people, and went out partying every single night, but I didn't really keep in touch with any of them. Not that I can remember.
Do you think at that point in time you like felt like you were in love with cannabis, or like you had something more with this plant than just?
I was in love with weed by the time I was 14. I was like I knew that I was going to smoke weed. I was already looking at the seeds that came in the weed, and having ideas. And my parents caught me growing weed in the closet when I was like 15, with a light bulb.
Oh my gosh.
A light bulb and a beer sign hanging in the closet. My dad saw the light coming out from under the floor and under the door, and he was like, "What the hell is this?" And a few times I got caught doing that, but yeah, so it was destined to happen.
Oh my gosh, when you were growing your first plant, did you like start from seeds, or I'm sorry?
Yeah. The weed we used to buy came with seeds, so it's like you didn't have to look for seeds.
Oh, while we're touching on that, I feel like, because AJ, you have been in the scene for so long. It's like OG Tyler made a comment earlier before the show where he was like, AJ was literally involved with all this stuff when we were like 2 years old. And it's like honestly crazy to think about, though, that like I've made my whole career in life this OG Tyler has. And like when I look at like time and experience, though, compared to somebody like you and just what you were able to see and do, and I want to
Yeah,
touch
I've
it.
probably smoked. Yeah, I've been around.
Yeah.
Smoked a lot. Smoked a lot. You know, people come up to me all the time and they say the first weed I ever smoked was sour diesel, and I'm like, yeah, well, you're pretty fucking lucky then, because fucking ugly weed before we got to that.
What's the ugliest, typhiest strain that you remember?
Oh my god, it didn't even have names. I used to have this Jamaican guy's beeper number, and I would beep him, and he would just, roll up, and he would sell me like $10 grams of, half of it would be like seeds.
Jeez.
And you knew even then, like, what did you, excuse me, what did you do the first time, like, a male came up? Or, like, did you know, like, this?
Not that far. I never got that far. I got caught. My dad was pretty savvy at, like, knowing something was up. So, like, he caught me like two or three times, trying to have plants in the house.
When was your first like experience growing outside of, your parents' house, like wherever you just were like, I'm gonna just do this myself?
I was living in a doorman building in Manhattan, in Midtown, and I was buying weed from this guy who lived upstate, and he had like a single metal halide lamp, 1,000 watt, and he went out and with all the money that he made selling me his weed, he went out and bought a fancier light. And so he offered to sell me the old light, so I bought it off him, and he brought it to me, and I hung it up in the closet of like an alcove studio apartment, and then I turned the kitchen into like a veg room, and then I had the closet for flowering, and I started right there, and I was evicted about a month and a half, 2 months later
Golly.
from the building. So I wound up moving all those plants and that light to a house in the Catskills, where and it was really living in the Catskills in like the mid '90s that like I really learned how to grow, because I was really I was buying and selling a lot of weed up until that point. So yeah, '94 is when I started, and by early '95 I had moved up north to the Catskills.
Dang.
Because I needed a place where I could get away with that, I guess. We didn't even have carbon filters back then, so when you had plants, especially in an apartment building, you couldn't really keep it under wraps.
When you would get, like, evicted and things like that, were you ever afraid of, like, getting arrested, like, back then? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I was terrified, but I wasn't too scared.
Yeah, you had that edge already.
Get it. I had kind of a mischievous, like, fuck it kind of attitude. So I would just, I knew it was risky, but I would do it anyway.
So when did you meet JJ?
I met JJ in, I believe I think I just wrote about it, so I should know, 1992.
Damn.
I met JJ at the Wetlands, which was a nightclub in downtown Manhattan.
The wetlands.
The wetlands. That sounds saucy.
Turn up.
Yeah. No, it's not really. It wasn't really saucy. It was more like, when Central Park would get dangerous when the sun would go down, then a lot of that scene would move over to this club called Wetlands downtown. It was like the hippie Grateful Dead themed kind of nightclub that, Tuesday night would be Grateful Dead night. And that was the most popular night, and so I met JJ there on a Tuesday.
And you guys,
he had good fucking weed.
Do you remember what he had?
Yeah, it was Northern Lights, and it was some of the best weed I'd ever seen. I'd just been in Amsterdam smoking Northern Lights. I bought Northern Lights, 20 times or more from every coffee shop I went to in Amsterdam, and so he said, "Oh, I've got some Northern Lights." I said, "Let me see it," and it was better than anything I'd seen in Amsterdam for sure. So I got his number immediately. I think he gave me a beeper number, And then yeah, and so basically I started beeping him every day until he put me into his rotation.
He got in the circle.
I think that is like really, that's just crazy to think about again with like how many years ago that was. Like,
Oh, dude, 92. We were 2 years old. That's what we're saying. Like,
He was about 10 years older than me, so he was like
golly.
old guy. We were like, hey, that old guy had some good fucking weed.
were you intimidated at all? Like, I don't know, like JJ, sometimes I feel like people say his personality, or not his personality, like he just comes
Crazy.
off.
I know with everybody, right? But like the truth is that I've known JJ for so many years, and you know, we've never really had a problem with each other over the years. You know, like he was always good to me, I was always good to him, and he kind of like saw me like as a grasshopper, and then he saw me kind of like blow up, and even before I was growing weed, like, you know, I really stepped up in the game just by starting off as like, you know, this little punk that was running around trying to like sell and buy weed into like, you know, he saw it sort of grow into like some kind of like a larger empire.
Mm.
Dang.
And so he was like, damn, okay, you know, like I guess it was a good idea. I gave this kid my number. And yeah, so we've always like, there's been so many characters and idiots, and just like he and I have both seen so much, and so we've always like gotten together to like laugh about all the and tell stories about all the people that that we mutually know, and like just the what's we would always kind of like fill each other in on gossip of the industry.
No, that's good,
So
though.
yeah, we
You
get
guys,
together like yeah.
dude, you guys are constantly brought up whenever people talk about, you know, Stardog or Chem or Sour Diesel or any of those things. I mean, y'all are all always brought up. So it's, you know, it's cool that you guys even talk about it. You're like, you remember this or you remember that, you know?
Well, and
Yeah,
I
the
think
one time JJ and I actually had a real conflict was when I met the Weasel and started like getting weed from him, because like JJ was very protective of the Weasel, and he was not happy when I started when I went out and met him one day, and we started talking and calling each other. But other than that, we've never had an issue, and we worked it out. So yeah, but I know I see online like he loves to, you know, but and that's part of his brand too, is that like he fights with everyone and stuff.
I mean, you
It's
got to be a
working.
fighter in this game to some degree. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I think OG Tyler has some questions.
Oh, yeah. No,
If,
I mean,
if that's okay, AJ.
Yeah, no. You kind of brought it up yourself. I mean, when was the first time that you met the Weasel?
I met the Weasel in I think 1993. And I could, yeah. So he actually came up to me at the club Wetlands, and you know, he saw me smoking with some people, and he came up to me and he said, hey, you know, I've got this Bob Snodgrass pipe. If you'll pack some weed in it for me, you'll be really glad you did, because I'm going to be here in a couple weeks with really good weed. I grow weed, you know. And I don't know, for some reason I took him. A lot of people you just didn't take seriously in that scene, but like he seemed legit, so I was like, okay, whatever, it can't hurt, you know. Says he grows good weed, so I gave him some weed, and sure enough, I saw him 2 weeks later, and that was the first time I ever saw Chem Dog.
Dang. Dun,
dun, dun, dun.
No, that's sick. Yeah, because I mean, obviously, I had heard the podcast like years ago that you and Adam had done with the Weasel, and you know, tried to listen to all I could, you know, about that. So it's really cool to like, you know, actually have you here and talk about that, and like, you know, because it seems like all that stuff is really true, you know. It's
No,
like
there's like a comedic aspect to it as I'm remembering it and writing it all down because it's like I I was not technically an employee of Wetlands, but I worked there. So I was an intern. I did all this stuff with like the environmental groups, you know, to save the earth and all this stuff. So I was involved with the club, which meant that I could put people on the guest list. I got free drinks. I had access to the office, and so yeah, JJ was not happy when he found out that I was like putting the Weasel on the guest list, being like, "Oh, come with me to the back office. Here's your drink," you know, like and so yeah, that we had a spat sort of over that,
So
but yeah, it was like a contest, you know, to see who could like give this guy the most perks and be the best person for him to sell his weed to.
right.
So we were competing for that.
Did you ever were you guys ever neighbors at one point?
Yeah, yeah, we were. It's so funny because it's the story is so incestuous because everyone involved in like you know in this story sort of plays a role in the sour legacy. But yeah, the Weasel lived next door to me um, for about a year and a half. At first, my friend Vondo was living next door, but then Vondo broke up with his girlfriend, and then she ended up getting together with the Weasel. So Vondo moved out, and the Weasel moved in.
the weasel's always
He's
winning.
like, "You're in, Weasel."
The Weasel weaseled his way in. So, so yeah, we were neighbors at that time, and you know we used to occasionally barbecue together and you know hang out. You know he would ride his lawnmower over to my house.
What?
They're the best kind of friends to have.
Dude, that would have been so cool to be a fly on the wall and just see all this, and you're just like, "Dang, like this is what was going on, man."
Yeah, well, you couldn't really tell anyone that you were growing weed
Mm.
unless they were like in the business. So, you know, if someone was in the business, then you'd be like dying to show them your grow and your weed and talk about everything, you know, because it's like I had some of my best friends I couldn't discuss that with. So,
Right.
I feel
so
like
he and
that.
yeah, we weren't that close, but at the same time, we had that one bond. So it's like, you know, we could tell each other, you know, we could talk weed.
Right. That's wild. And was his underdog what was called the headband?
That's disputed, and it's hard to ask. It's hard to know because he might not remember everything correctly. But what I can say is this: is that the underdog was around. I don't think it was.
Oh.
I think the underdog was different because what eventually was called the headband was called D1,
Okay.
which people confuse with Diesel One, but it was D1, and I think it was more like you know ABCD, you know 1, 2, 3, 4.
Gotcha.
He was testing out seeds, and then he eventually came out with this something that he was calling that, and the D1, I believe, is what he was calling it D1, and then he called it Day Wrecker. So, but a friend of mine once said to me, like, this weed makes me feel like I'm wearing a headband. So after that, I was like, yo, we're going to ship the headband. So my buddy I give him credit for naming it because he said that to me. And so that's what we called it, the headband. And that, I believe that was D1.
Awesome.
And people think that that's like somehow, that somehow was a parent of sour, but that's all not true. The D1 was its own thing, and that I believe had NL5 from Sensi Seed in it.
Okay.
I grew a strain Day Wrecker at a company at least, and they claimed it was like the real deal. But honestly, have you seen like Day Wrecker or D1 since this?
If we got good weed in the 80s, it was called Day Wrecker. So
that was just like
so that was common term that got thrown around. Like this weed is day wrecker. It's like creeper. It's not a strain. It's just a description. So, but Mike Klopp, the Weasel, was like, he was older than us too. He's probably 10 years older than me. So he was like more a kid of the 80s.
Mm.
I was more like a weed head of the 90s. He was coming out of the 80s, and he used terms like day wrecker. So he decided to call that day wrecker. And he always hated the fact that we made up our own names for stuff. He hated diesel. He hated headband, all that.
Dang.
Do you ever see like those cuts, AJ, like out now that like like this is the real deal or this is not?
I could recognize headband for sure, because that was one of the things that, like, I primarily smoked the weed that I grew. The only weed that I ever really liked, aside from my own weed, was certain things that I would get in Amsterdam, and I would go and get some of that headband. The headband I really liked, but there wasn't a lot of weed back then in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, that I had a lot of respect for once I started growing my own. So yeah, I'm not really, I'm not really great at identifying stuff so much. I can identify, like, I see stuff that I recognize because I used to sell a lot of Canadian weed,
Oh, that's nice.
sometimes. But like, I wasn't really like, I wasn't really into all that stuff, and I was never really a fan of a lot of different things that were going on at that time outside of sour and the stuff that I was growing. Aside from that, and yeah, the headband was one of the few things that I would actually go get and want to have and would trade for.
Do you remember the first time you got the actual sour cut?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because now I talk to like some of the Albany guys. We didn't share information back then,
Right.
so for years I thought that the cut that these Albany kids gave me when I first moved to the Catskills in 1995, I always thought that was a sour, but apparently what they gave me was called a Diesel 1, and it was from that seed vine that the sour came from. So the first time I ever grew the sour was about 1996, probably, when my buddy in Manhattan wanted to build a closet grow, and he was friends with the Albany guys, so he went and got cuts from them of the sour. I had already been selling sour. I would buy their sour and sell it for them, but we were running other Chem Dogs seeds that we had gotten from the Weasel in flower, other bag seeds. So the first time I grew the sour was right around then, and it was, I built a grow for my buddy in Manhattan at that time, and we were growing it at his place there. So yeah, we grew it on the Upper West Side in 1996 ish.
Dang.
I knew a lot more about the timeline as I write. I'm just not at that timeline yet. But as I write and everything falls into perspective, I'm able to like actually figure out what years different things happened. So I assume that was 96.
Dang.
That's it.
Yeah, so that makes sense from what I had heard in all the podcasts I listened to, that it had got like that, this, if it was seeded weed that got to the Albany people and then they found the different phenos or whatever from those seeds, like, that's nuts.
Yeah, and they claim that they found several seeds and that they then crossed those seeds together, but that's not even, I didn't even know that until probably a couple years ago when we were all hanging out, because we didn't tell each other anything back then.
No.
No one no one shared information. There was no there were no podcasts where people were publicly telling you what they've done. So
Right. There's no
you kind of
Instagram either. People weren't like DMing the other people.
I feel like that's probably where like JJ and you were so much more relatable than probably most people like you were saying that you were around. I bet it was like terrifying like back then just legally or like getting robbed or I mean all the I don't know, just so many layers to like really have a passion that strong though for this that long ago and that it was so risky. I think it's so respectful that like you preserved these genetics and like how you guys did end up working together though on I don't know, it really changed obviously the history of the game.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he and I watched it all go from this very like elite exclusive club to like, this global phenomenon. So we have kind of a similar perspective, we checked in with each other like every like few months, just to be like, holy shit, look what's going on here.
Do you
It was growing exponentially.
Oh, I'm so sorry, AJ. Do you ever feel like I don't know, do you have any like anger or like resentment towards some parts of it or do you wish that some things played out differently than where it currently stands or I don't know. What's your perspective?
I mean, yeah, I suppose. I mean, I'm not really. Am I angry? No, no, I'm not angry. But I, I'm grateful because I like I've always said, I was kind of like, yeah, I was doing my best to be in a place that was relevant because I just wanted to get the weed all the time. But it really is. I was standing in the right place at the right time in history where I just, the only choice I had was, to like grab on and not let go of the chem and the sour and all these things and just pursue them ruthlessly and until they were just part of my life and part of my existence. But yeah, it's been really good to me. So no, I couldn't be angry at anyone. There's probably a bunch of people that are angry at me, but yeah, I'm not. It's not reciprocal. I don't care.
We all gotta have a little bit of that.
When
Yeah, you're
when
nobody until everybody hates you.
when was the first time that you ever went to like the West Coast, being that you like always were in New York?
Well, I went to the West Coast pretty frequently. I did a grow in LA in 2002.
Oh
Um,
wow.
I which at the time seemed like a huge grow. It was like 30 lights, but it seemed like because at that time the biggest grow I had done was like you know probably 20 lights. So we were doing 30 in a warehouse there, and that kept me. At that point I was spending half my time in LA for about 6 months while we did the build out and ran the first grow, and then the ceiling fell in, so that came to an end.
God
Oh
dang.
my gosh.
So
How
so
what happened? What happened?
it rained and the ceiling fell in. It was a shitty old warehouse in Pasadena, I think. So
Did it
so
ruin
yeah,
the grow?
yeah. I mean, at one point I was standing in the grow and I could see a helicopter flying overhead.
No.
So yeah, so I was like, turn off the lights. But yeah,
That is such a stressful
we
situation.
we cut it down and shut it down, and then I didn't grow in California again for till 2016. But yeah, I would go to California a lot. And then especially once I moved to Colorado, I would go to California as often as possible because I wanted to get out of Denver's a small town, so I wanted to get out and
Be back to the
go to
big
L.
city living.
in the Bay Area. That's how I got sucked into living out here.
It's so beautiful. Look at that background.
So, like with the Kim and the sour, both are like a fuely strain. Do you remember the first time that you tried OG Kush?
Yeah, well, when I was growing in 2002, everyone was like, the way people were crazy about sour in New York, people were crazy about Kush in LA, and people were selling like $400 or $500 ounces of Kush, and I bought a couple of them, and I thought it was okay. Then, sometime around 2008, because of Adam Dunn, I had been hooking Snoop up with weed when he would come to New York, and so
Oh, that's so cool.
eventually Snoop's camp gave me a cut of OG that I started growing just for him, and that was called the RBK. And
Oh,
when I started growing the Kush, it became one of my favorite plants.
Nice.
It was funny because people in New York didn't want to hear about it. I'd like, yo, try this. This is fucking amazing. And people would say, no, I only want sour. I don't want anything else. Anytime I tried to grow anything else, people were like, nah, no, 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 no. So yeah. So basically, I just grew it for Snoop and for myself.
Dang.
could you imagine growing for Snoop and yourself?
What did RBK even stand for?
Ricky's Brothers Kush, because
Oh.
Ricky Palomino, his tour manager, was tasked with making sure that Snoop got what he needed in every town, and he was constantly on the move. So it was a very demanding job, and so to at least take care of the problem at home, I think Ricky got his brother growing weed for Snoop, and so they called it Ricky's Brothers Kush.
Wow.
And when they found the plant that Snoop liked the most, they just started producing it for him.
Jeez. That's
And
sick.
then now he wanted it everywhere he went. So in order to make life easier, Ricky was traveling around the world giving out these clones, just trying to get as many growers as possible to have that ready for him when he showed up.
What?
Dang. And then like everyone got blessed, along the way.
I grew RBK back in like 2011, 2012 or something. I just worked at a good spot that had a passion for old school genetics and stuff. And it was such a beautiful, I mean, plant. It's hard to talk about these things because of the different phenos and different like variations, not that particularly, but like of Kushes, throughout time, and like when somebody does take it in and rename, and not rename, but like where it becomes like Coal Creek Kush or something like that.
It's a rename game.
Yeah, but that RBK is beautiful.
Man,
Yeah,
so
OG.
what do you have lined up like for the future for AJ?
Well, um, I hopefully going to finish and sell this book, and then I'm working with a company in New York called Flower House, and they're growing sour right now. Hopefully,
Ooh,
going to be on shelves in 3 months.
Nice.
let us
Uh,
know.
we can
Heck
get some
yeah.
more stores open in New York. I went to a store in New York a few days ago and bought some weed, and it was terrible. So yeah, New York really needs that. What I bought was called sour diesel too, but it was obvious it was not related.
Yeah, I think there just needs to be like a strong push for New York growers out there, because all the weed I've seen in like the shops or whatever has been sourced from Cali.
Mm,
A lot of it.
it's true.
Yeah. Well, you know, uh, don't buy weed is my motto. Uh, it's my advice for everyone. Do what you want to do, but if you want my advice, don't buy weed. But if you're if you are gonna buy weed, get it from Flower House.
Get the real sour.
It's true. I want the real sour. I feel it's gotta be so cool, AJ, that you can like really I don't know, really see you're so set apart from majority of people, and like you've been a part of the scene for so long, and like even watching it go legal here to across the country now is like I feel like you've adapted with all these things, and I don't know, just been a part of everybody's kind of niche and journey, like you said, like these people that really valued genetics and like breeding and preservation, like it's, I just, what a journey.
Are you doing breeding, like any breeding stuff now?
Yeah. I've been working on stuff for several years. I just released 2 seed lines
Ooh.
recently in the last 2 weeks because I've been making seeds for a long time, but doing it in small batch and testing things out and basically just growing it for myself. Um, so so yeah, I finally got it together a little bit, and I put out a couple different things. One of them was a sour, the other was a haze. So, um, in keeping with New York taste, I figured that's a good place to start.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
I've got lots.
when was the first time that you had smoked like like a true haze in New York?
Um, well, we used to call this guy Chief when we were in high school, and he sold haze. It was $35 for a gram, but
Oh
he
my
would
God.
deliver. He always called you back within like 2 minutes, and he would deliver to you like Domino's in 30 minutes or less. And so we used to call this guy Chief and just buy, we'd get like $35 little bags off of him, and he sold haze. So I got, when I first tried haze in Amsterdam, I was like, oh, this is the Chief's weed. I didn't. It didn't even have a name. He didn't say, oh, this is haze. But when I started smoking hazes in Amsterdam, I really got into hazes, and when I on my second trip to Amsterdam was in 1993, and I got really into haze then.
Dang.
What's with what's your thoughts on the piff right now? Have you heard everybody's
The
getting
piff's
high?
good. Um,
First off, is the piff and haze
Everyone's
two
got
separate?
piff.
Is haze and piff two separate things?
Piff is like an NL5 haze, and a
Mm.
lot of people just nowadays when people say haze, I think they just really mean NL5 haze.
Okay.
Oh,
Back in the day, when you said haze, you meant haze, like the original haze. But
amnesia or something.
or amnesia was no, amnesia was like fake haze.
Really?
Amnesia, Jack, super silver. That was all like shortcut haze. That's like 80-day haze.
Oh, okay.
The hazes that I used to grow back in the 90s were like 140 days,
Yeah.
and you got these like long stringy buds. An ounce of it would fill like a gallon Ziploc bag. It had no mass, no density to it. It's just volume, and yeah, it's a different animal. But I love NL5 haze. I smoke piff. I like to smoke piff and blunts and stuff like that. Back in the day, I never trusted it off,
Mm.
you know, straight off the black market 20 years ago. I mean, I you wouldn't know what the fuck was in it, but I always went to Amsterdam because I would smoke NL5 haze there and haze there. So and I would always bring a little home with me to have a little some for later. But so I was never really into the piff. Occasionally someone would show you a really nice pound of piff, and you'd have to buy like 5 pounds to get it,
Jeez.
and the other 4 pounds would be shit. So it's like you would buy 1 pound that you could sell for like a lot of money, and then you'd have to fire sale the other four. So
Mm.
it was always I always lost money on piff.
God.
You never lose money on sour, though.
So now I see great piffs around.
Dang.
You ever got out with sour?
Yeah.
That's what we used to say.
Yeah.
So
People want to know, AJ, where to
no
get
matter
your
how much you pay,
seeds.
Yeah. Where can we get your seeds, JJ? Or AJ?
that's a good question. Right now, people are just walking up to me and seeing me places and being like, "Hey, you got any seeds?"
You guys slide
And I'll
into
say,
my
"Yeah, I got some
DMs
right here."
and I'll
Yeah.
we'll make it
So
happen.
yeah, when I was in upstate New York, I was like meeting people at Walmarts and stuff to sell them seeds. So yeah, I mean, yesterday I was down in Santa Cruz, so I just kind of like announce it. Hey, I'm here. I should probably do better. I should probably find somebody that I'm just not that guy who's going to go to the post office and I don't do the Venmo and all these things. That's I'm too old for that. So yeah, but if there's anyone that wants to sell my seeds, get at me.
Shoot, I might have to get at you.
Just
We get for them.
well, if you guys really want AJ seeds, you can really slide into the DMs on my page or OG Tyler's page,
better believe
and
it.
we'll get a hold of AJ, and we'll make it happen.
Yeah, I saw.
I'm gonna walk hours and have some with me, so maybe some people can catch me there.
Yeah, I saw a couple of heavy hitters on your post about those seeds that they were in there trying to get some seeds from you. So
AJ's like a little mysterious. Like he's like, ooh, maybe you'll get them, maybe you won't.
While supplies last.
while supplies last.
Well, I feel like, are we missing? Excuse me. Are we missing anything that I feel like is really important that we bring up right now? Because this has been so incredible talking with you, AJ. I just want to make sure I cover all the bases.
I like weed, so I can always ask weed questions. But what is your opinion of the Skittles? Because I know that's like a hot profile. So,
well, if I mean, look, I did dabs for many years, and I'll do the dabs sometimes, but I'm not like a rosin guys really, like I don't do the torch and the thermometer and the little bowl of alcohol and stuff. Like that's too deep for me. But it seems to be very popular with the rosin crowd. So
right.
it's I grew some Skittles in my backyard last summer. I think it was the first time I've ever grown it. It was pretty good. It's tasty.
Okay. I was gonna say that and sour mixed together would be freaking
delicious.
Oh, dude, it'd be crazy. Cause that's what I do.
A guy who did that down in New York, New Terp City. They have the Skittles sour.
Dang.
Yeah, cause that's kind of what I do. I try to get like a little bit of Skittles rosin and then a little bit of sour, rosin, and then mix the two, and then or if I can find GMO or something like that and mix it with it. But
sour is like the best go-to. Like it does get you like there's something about the sour high though. I think that's a lot different. Like the flavor is one thing, but like it's the perfect wake and bake. It's the perfect go to sleep. It's the perfect hike.
it's just good smoking weed, man.
It is beautiful.
And you know it.
It's a lifestyle.
And it yields really well. I think even growing it, honestly, though, I think it's pretty resilient for the type of plants I think it is, or the type of like strain group that it comes. I don't know. I think it's just she's pretty hardy though.
And she makes great hash. That's another thing. Like makes fantastic hash.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought sour made the best hash, but now you have people that would argue because they have these special hash plants, and like GMO. And,
yeah.
Now there's a lot more variety, but I'm so old school. Like I'm still living in my old bubble. So yeah, to me, sour is the best plant, makes the best hash, and It's my favorite go-to.
What are your thoughts on
I'll
like
always
the
be biased, so I'm not really.
That's okay. We're
I'm
all
what?
biased.
what are your thoughts on like where the market's at right now currently? Is like with all these new breeders and strains coming out left and right, and I don't know, just price everything is like, is there certain things that you're surprised to see where they're at now from what you've seen them begin as?
Well, it used to, we used to do anti-marketing, which was like, you better not tell anyone you're getting this from me. Now it's like, it's like everything is so laced up with marketing. I think that's a huge difference. So it used to be that the weed spoke for itself, but now it comes with a whole campaign.
Mm,
So maybe it's not the best weed, but if it has the best packaging and the coolest image and whatever, then it's passable.
so true.
Yeah.
Do you think any of the new strains, like, is there anything that you really do like that you've seen come up? This doesn't have to be from like this last 5 years or anything, but
Yeah, I mean things are okay. I think like as you get older though, you just like you get very I don't know. I mean, to me, there's like there's like four or five different kinds of weed. So if you can show me something that's brand new, but it's gonna fit into one of those categories, or it's
mm,
gonna be one and two, so or one and four. So really, having gone through so much weed in my life, like I look at it and I immediately compare it to something I'm familiar with already.
It's a
And I'll say,
it.
oh, I smoked weed like this in Amsterdam, and then we used to sell weed that smelled like this from Canada. And this looks like K Rocks, or this looks like Sweet Tooth or something. But
mm-hmm,
everything kind of falls into a category. Um, whether it's gassy, it's fruity, it's fresh cut grass, or it's this or it's that. Well, I kind of there's nothing new under the sun, is what I'm trying to say. Really, like anything that's
sure.
brand new is going to remind me of something I already know.
I think that's what I'm trying to tell like my group of friends, like when we're talking about marketing ourselves and like even genetics or deciphering yourself in the market and like educating the consumer instead of like the people that are really already into it is like I was just talking about how people really want to connect to cannabis. Like it's not, it isn't the number. Like and I know people are getting really technical and like it's not saying that that information isn't valuable, but like it really is like the effects and like what it brings you back to or what memories it creates or what memories, you've made in the past or connections with people. Like I think that people more want that and like some of these classics to come back just because those were some of the best times in their life.
Yeah, you know, that's it too. I think it's like I like the classics because that's what I'm familiar with, and that's like it's connected to everything, like my entire memory, right? So it's you know, and someone will be like, "Oh, check out this new strain," and I'll be like, "No, this is Durban."
Mm.
I'll be like, "Yeah, this isn't new. This smells like early girl, bro." So yeah, I, there's nothing new. There's definitely a lot more good quality things around though, and there's a lot more people fiddling around with genetics and coming up with cool things, and
Yeah.
coming up with plants that smell more and taste great, yeah, taste stronger and all that. So there's a lot of good work being done, but yeah, it's still it's still the same plant, what it all boils down to. So if you've been smoking it for many many years, then you there's nothing that's new that's going to come along and really surprise you.
Mm. disappointing, but so true.
Yeah, that's why people are trying to hunt. You know,
And
people are
planting
trying.
seeds is still really exciting. Don't get me wrong.
But I feel like it's something weird about those strains that we're talking about. Like those flavors and everything were so different from one another. Like this is ridiculous, I think, to some people, but I think like Chem and Sour Diesel, all those things are so distinct from an OG Kush or a Trainwreck or like these hazes or like they were so different. Now I think the market is getting thrown like a really diluted or convoluted like kind of mixture of everything.
Yeah, like we're all going to end up with the same weed eventually because
Yeah.
it's only going to be like 3 dominant genes left in the pool. And yeah, I think about that too, though. Like, and someone's like, here, try this, cookie Chem
Milkshake.
OG sour. It's like, well, you haven't really left anything out.
Yes. And it seems like it comes in waves, just like you're saying with the market. It's like if everybody's in demand at these stores of a certain strain, that strain will make that appear tomorrow, no problemo. And when those things happen though, it does really confuse just I think the market. Like and even the people or, I mean especially the people that really are passionate about this and they walk into a store and they do see like I'm just gonna use Tropicana cookies because it's so distinctive. But like they'll walk in and get upset if somebody's selling Tropicana cookies that's like green and like totally some other strain or something where they feel like they're getting ripped off because they want to pay for something. Sour diesel. I feel like I've bought sour diesel so many times and it's not like almost as like let's see what this is. And
Yeah.
it's really hard to find the real deal.
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of people have been burned on store-bought sour diesel. Me too.
Cheers to that.
No, I mean it's but these strains though, the Chem, the Sour, the OG, those varieties are now the exotic.
Yeah.
Because there's not very many people putting them out. It's just a bunch of like cardboard terp gelato that's going around in like Mylar bags. It's just getting passed around and passed around and it's like the same thing. So now that's why like that guy Elephant's Growth in Cali can get 8,000 a pound for his OG or whatever is because like there's nobody with that quality of that product. So it's just I hope we can see like a resurgence in the old school genetics.
Yeah, I want to see a resurgence in high prices.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
It's both like I really want to push that with the people that really support growers and breeders and like it's been such a challenging market for everybody and I think that you almost get stuck if you're the person that's trying to produce quality like no matter your scale like at your house like at commercial grows anything like that is I think when you really care is like your overhead is so expensive, right? Like just like you said at the beginning of your story, your guy sold you or bought a new light and gave you his light. Like this is like people are always putting their money back into this. And I feel like when these people, I understand like I spoke blunts and I understand that you can cruise through weed really fast, but like finding that balance where like you can support people that you really care and want to see in the market, like you got to go back to like spending $300, $400, $500 an ounce. And like, it sounds outrageous, but when you really think about it, it's like, no, you want to finish these strains. You can't be running 9 cycles a year or 24 cycles with your perpetual harvest and all these things at 8 weeks or 7 weeks. And I think really bringing that quality back together and preservation of these genetics is like instead of everybody like hoeing them out and breeding them all the time, it's like actually just holding on to them. Like if you really appreciate the strain, like doing what you did, like taking care of them, taking care of the homies that like will care of you, keep it safe. I don't know. I think everybody's got to band together.
Band of brothers.
And even at like 6,000 a pound, you could easily put all that back into your grow. I mean, you could. There's no limit to how much you can spend just on your grow.
Yeah, and the more you love it, like it's unfortunate as a person that really loves marketing and like packaging and all those things, but like there's a line though when you're like a startup company or when you're just like you said, your overhead and like the things, the money that goes back into your product actually is like it's hard to compete with fancy packaging when like there's a part where a consumer can't afford X, Y, and Z, and then a person can't afford to come up with buying 1,000 counts of quantities of everything just so you can have a pretty box for once. Like, is I think it's both ways. Is I think you should the weed should be the quality that you want to put it in a quality package to display it properly, but I don't think it should be selling weed to these consumers because I think once again they're gonna ruin the trust. The trust in paying for a high price point. They're not gonna, just like you said, you'll pay for it like 2 or 3 times, but you'll never go back after that trusting.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, the stuff I bought is like that's like basically you're preying on one-time buyers.
Yeah, it's a dirty
So,
hustle.
you know, I see that it's like in the restaurant business. Like you can have like a fancy restaurant, but if the food sucks, you're only going to fall for it once. So, but if the food's good, it doesn't matter what the restaurant looks like. So, I never had fancy packaging, and I used to just throw shit in a turkey bag, and I got top dollar for it. So I don't think that packaging is really all that important. Um,
You're right.
if you're in the quality market, it really doesn't matter. If someone gives me really good weed in a brown paper bag, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I almost feel like the market of the true connoisseur breeders and growers should band together when everybody only has fancy packaging and drop a Ziploc bag line of like
Yeah,
only the best that's in just zippies.
well, I know. For the sake of irony, that's coming.
Yeah. I want to be a part of it. AJ, you got to be there too.
Yeah, I'm gonna do lunch bags.
Yes. It is true though. Honestly, the turkey bag, I carry my turkey bag still all the time. Like people make fun of me, but I'm like, it's the best when you like cruise through weed or something. I mean, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
the
I still
best.
use turkey bags. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't need to smell like weed everywhere I go. Sometimes I don't want to smell like weed.
It's
People
true.
don't need to know what I'm up to. Is the second I walk into a room.
It's
If
so
I'm
true.
like, I could be like shopping at a department store or going out to dinner. I don't need to smell like weed. I always have turkey bags with me.
It's classy. It's not trashy.
No, that's the way I like to live.
It's rude to walk around smelling like weed, not because
Yep.
it's not always welcome in the atmosphere you're in.
Exactly.
Some people are really, really offended by it too. I've definitely gotten yelled at in Colorado. Like people think this is like some just like wonderful weed place, and it's like you go to Boulder and mess with the wrong person with just something like that.
After smoking dabs, like uh you don't smell the same as like you do with burnt weed, So then like when I do smoke a joint and I go somewhere, I'm like, God dang, I like reek, you know?
Yeah, it's like when someone eats a tuna sandwich on an airplane. It's disgusting, like because it's some smell that you didn't ask for. So people might feel that way about the smell of weed. It's definitely not a good way to change their mind,
Nice.
True.
forcing it on.
That's true.
That's an awesome. I like that. Well, AJ, where do people get this book? Where do they get your autobiography?
Hopefully everywhere soon.
Everywhere.
I'm not done writing it. I'm kind of in the thick of it now. So
Will you let us know? And we're gonna sell the shit out of your book
And your
yeah.
seed and your
and your
seeds.
seeds. Yeah,
Watch
we'll
out.
put the seeds in the book.
Hey now, the seeds are ready. The seeds are ready.
Yes, yes. Well, AJ,
I was
thank.
thinking a great way to sell seeds would be to put them inside of a wet paper towel. Just sort of speed things up as far as getting people to use them.
Right?
I love that. Let's get this let's get this going. That's so awesome. I feel okay. What do you gentlemen think? Are you ready to wrap this up, or how do you feel? I think we could be missing something.
I mean,
AJ, I don't want to miss anything of your time or this moment right now.
Well, this has been a very interesting interview because these are a lot of questions I haven't been asked before. So kudos for that.
yeah.
That's so nice. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight and seriously discussing all these things with us. It's still mind blowing to me to think about how often you moved and like just your traveling alone portions of your life. I'm still like mind blown with, and how you were able to keep these connections. And I don't know, it's just you don't meet a lot of people like that, especially in the weed scene, and like it's refreshing.
You carry the flame,
Yeah,
the flame carrier.
you're a little sparkle
Yeah,
baby.
I try.
You succeeded. You're succeeding.
It's just it's like the compulsion to smoke good weed definitely helped. So, I couldn't run out of that. So, it sort of kept me moving forward. Always looking for a new grow. Always looking to do more. So,
Dang. That's where we have a common bond is we sold out our lives for this one thing. That's the cool.
yeah, it's too late to turn back now, right?
It's too late,
It
dude.
is.
We're on
No matter
it.
how bad this market gets, I made my bet a long time ago. So there's no other options at this point.
I think that's the thing is like it's funny when you see like the market right now in Colorado, like a lot of people are leaving the state. The state is like it's hurting pretty bad in quality and price point, all the things. But
Yeah.
it's crazy though because none of like the real people that really love this, like we're all like struggling to pay our bills or whatever's going on, and all of us are like, but wait, we can't do anything else. Like what else will we do? Like and
Yeah.
it's the first time we're all panicking, but I think it is like, honestly, it gives you like that real renewing perspective that I'm like, anybody that sticks through this and like,
Fight or flight, man.
yeah, it's like they really, it's going to come back. And I think that our consumers, customers, us, like everybody's is going to have to band together. And I think it's going to make a tighter, replenished community.
Yeah.
That's what I hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the fear of not succeeding and starving to death will definitely motivate you to do your best work.
It's true.
Yes.
It's one way to hustle.
That's it. That's it. I mean, that's the only way.
The harder we'll try.
That's exactly. You got the state going against you with testing. You got all these like factors. You got these shithole buildings that you're trying to work magic in. Overhead. I don't know. Even like your library at your house. Like I look at it sometimes and I'm just like, damn, I've been vegging 60 strains or more, like making no money off of these things for such large time frames of just being like, oh, I can't lose these cuts. I'm so grateful to have them and like feel that way. But like sometimes people will be like moving or my neighbors or normal obstacles everybody get broken into, whatever, is you still find a way. You're like, no, like people will be like your dog, or you can't say dog, but like, I don't know. It comes really, your plants come first. You will freeze or sweat yourself out. If
We need cryo freezing banks to store genetic material so that we don't have to, keep that one room in the house with 7-foot plants falling over.
Yeah.
Constantly have to downsize and reboot.
Yeah, you're right. It's hard to trust. It's hard to trust even like a business or a friend with like sharing genetics or like holding on to stuff, because I think people really miss it sometimes. Is like if you get the cut and you like say don't share this, it's like The thing is you're gonna always be.
Only 10 people are gonna get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it never works like that, and it's like, and then they'll go sell it, or like it. I don't know. It's amazing how fast they'll go out into the market, and it's amazing how fast the price will either tank because they're everywhere all of a sudden, or like these clone onlys. Like I've seen people at like the grocery stores like handing shit out that they just got from like whatever, and they don't realize like the value of it, and they're just like here, and I don't know. It's nice to share. It is. Don't get me wrong, but like it changes this wave of like people don't realize how much it affects such a bigger picture, like actual relationships with people, actual, I don't know, there's the value of the strain and making sure it doesn't get, I don't know, messed with. I feel like people just don't realize that.
Yeah. Well, I went through a phase like 20 years ago where I just started selling the cuts to everybody, and most of them would come back in a year asking, and they'd have to buy it again. And very few of them still have cuts. So even when they get out, it's like once people realize how much work is involved in keeping it around, it they end up giving up, and then it dies. So you know if I give a cut to someone and say don't give this to anyone, even if it gets out to 50 people, only 2 of them will still have it in a year.
Wow. I guess I never even thought about that, but that is so true. I,
Even
I get hit up all the time.
facilities, a lot of them can't hold on to things without losing them. So
I think that. Do you think that's like how nature is keeping itself safe?
Yeah.
I
They're
suppose
like, here we go.
some of these plants are going to outlive us all.
That is crazy to think about. Ooh, AJ, have you ever seen Cali Mist? Like the real Cali Mist?
Yeah, that was like popular in Amsterdam in like 1994 or 5.
I want it so bad.
Yeah, I keep hearing people talk about it, but you know what? It was never that great.
You didn't like her that much?
I never really thought much of it.
I grew it one time, a long
A5.
time. Oh no, what were you gonna say?
I mean, the Neville's A5 cut has always been my thing, and Neville's Haze, like anything else, I've never really been that impressed with. Like Cali Mist was kind of like another one of these shortcut hazes, like predates the Jack, I think, but it's like basically I look at it as like a Jack.
Did you ever get to try some of like Soma's NYC diesel that he had out there?
I saw it, yeah. That wasn't diesel.
That wasn't it though. He said that was just his little makeshift thing.
Yeah, that was just that was just his clever marketing ploy to get people from New York to come and buy all his seeds.
Dude,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
Marketing was popping
Grapefruit.
then,
Right? It was like grapefruit. That weed looked like shit that we would call grapefruits from
Wow.
California.
Okay, Mike Denver asked about a strain that I have been trying to find for the last 10 years. I want it so bad. Is Hawaiian Snow. Have you ever heard of Hawaiian Snow?
No.
See, I thought it was fake.
He said if I did hear about it, I wouldn't smoke it.
I used to go to the peanut butter, and I remember Maui Wowie.
Maui
but
Wowie.
Never heard of the Hawaiian Snow.
What was it? What was Maui Wowie like when you saw that? Like, I don't think I've ever seen the real deal. I've seen Maui Wowie, but I don't think it's Maui Wowie.
Well, there was a grower from up in Maine that used to grow outdoor Maui Wowie and bring it down to New York every fall. So that's my interpretation of it. I never went to Hawaii in the 70s or 80s and saw Maui Wowie for real. But like the stuff that we would get from Maine every year was pretty good for East Coast outdoor. It was all right, and it was like flowery,
A little floral.
It tasted good. It was sweet and flowery, and for 1994, it was easy to sell.
What about bugs back then? I imagine that disease and bug problems would be less occurring than they are now. What do you think?
I wasn't sharing cuts with the world,
Yeah.
so Wasn't bringing new plants in. The people who worked for me didn't have their own grows at home, and now it's like if you're connected to the industry in any way, you're exposed to all this stuff. So I never really
Constantly.
have a big problem with bugs, especially in New York City, but even in upstate New York, we didn't really have problems. We had mites at some point. In the early 2000s, we had a horrible plague of mites, but other than that, we never had PM. We never
No.
had any other types of pests. We had gnats occasionally, and that's about it. It wasn't until I moved to Colorado and took over a commercial grow that I was like, what the fuck is going on here, man? There was like pockets with like different populations of different shit, like,
Yeah.
like around the grow. You'd be like, oh yeah, that's the mite section over there. That's the PM section over there.
Let me show
And
you our aphids.
it was like divided territories of pests. So that's when I really started learning about pest management. I learned more about that in the last 7 years than I learned in the first 25, because we just didn't have those problems. We
What
weren't
did you
exposed.
the grow that you were working at in Denver? We don't have to say the company or anything, but like the square footage of like like what can you describe the grow to us a little bit?
Well, there were a bunch of them.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
they had a lot of grows. So, but but yeah, I guess it was probably. I think it was about. There was in Denver. I think they had 350 lights in total, divided amongst 3 grows.
Golly.
That's big though.
That was big
That's
for
pretty.
me. 'Cause, like, before that, like, yeah, 30 or 40 was probably the biggest I'd worked on.
That's like I think people forget because they see all these like huge square footage totals nowadays, but like I think people forget how like a 500 square foot grow was big at one point. Like you're saying, like if you had 12 lights in a room or 20. So like these rooms that started having 100, it was like what? I imagine
Yeah, I mean,
like
when I did my first 10 lighter, I was like, oh my god, man, this is heavy. Like, this is fucking crazy. We get caught in this. So yeah, we didn't really we weren't even thinking on the level of like, one day I'm gonna run a 350 light operation.
mm,
I never, that thought never crossed my mind. I thought maybe one day I'd get a 20 lighter when I had 10.
Do you think like when you first came into that situation, were you a little bit were you like taken back like, "Oh god, like what have I got myself into? This is nuts."
Yeah, I kind of wanted to like hit the reset button on everything. That wasn't an option, so I kind of wanted to start like trying to like steer the ship, into a better situation.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I yeah I've since not I've worked in a lot of commercial grows, and now that I'm out here, it's like you're getting people are like, hey, you want this cut? And I'm like, yeah, fucking bring it over. I'll check it out, and I'll like dip it in rubbing alcohol, and then hopefully keep it separated for like a week or two until it looks okay.
yeah.
But like still, I mean, we get things here uh, that are just in the ether and on plants that come in and out. So I've just gotten a lot better at dealing with those things. I just never needed to know before that.
I mean, yeah.
I think that's how russets. Like I remember when russet mites like blew up in Colorado. It was like 2012, and nobody knew what they were. Like we all had combated spider mites, all these things, but like your plants would look healthy, like for the most part, and they looked decent, right? They looked like wasn't a big deal. But then the second you would flip them into flower, they would just like totally get annihilated. And like we didn't have, I don't know, it was so hard to identify them back then. And like even I remember in the late 2000s, even I remember nobody would share knowledge. Like people think they're private now, but like No, it was like nobody would help each other like that. And you were, I don't know. Just remember russets sucked.
Yeah, we
No
didn't even
one.
have internet back in the day. We just had to like figure it out. So luckily we didn't have russets and things like that. But yeah, we did have spider mites, and they were pretty miserable. And I think we ended up using like Avid to get rid of them because we didn't know anything else.
It's that's we know that I know about that product.
Now I'm really good at killing them. Now I'm like, I'm like, I hope someone gives me a plant with mites so I can like, you know,
Kill them.
flex my skill set.
I feel like that's honestly what the biggest separation. I think when you feel really confident in your system and like you know you run a good line, a good everything, but when it comes to combating bugs, is like there's a lot that goes into it. A lot of like mistakes in the beginning, or like not realizing like pesticides don't like fix every like kill every insect, like realizing some things only target this, something, how to properly quarantine. I think it's unfortunate, but we all had to learn, I think, in the wrong ways, where like your shit gets an infestation from like taking in a cut or a clone and you not knowing what something is, like, it, it's I don't know. It happens, I think, so often, even now when everybody's talking about HLVD. Is like I was working with that in commercial grows and Fusarium like 9 years ago, and now I remember diagnosing people's plants and then being like, no, this is absolutely wrong. This girl is crazy, and then now it's like becoming this like really known disease, and so people are talking about it, but it's like I imagine AJ, for even you've seen like that happen, like where these like people will kind of carry like this, I don't want to say arrogance, but like where they're not really open to like learning or like seeing like the knowledge that you've had from just the exposure throughout all the years of being around. I don't know, like actually growing large scale, small, taking in different genetics.
Well, when I first entered the licensed industry, people were using all this lingo and jargon, and I didn't know what they were even talking about because, you know, I didn't learn from reading. I just learned from trial and error, and I'd just be like, "Look, shut up about all that. All right, just do what I tell you to do. All right, like if we do the things the way that I say, then everything's going to be fine. We try, like I don't want to hear about any of your fancy terms or products I've never heard of. Let's just do what I know." And so now, I have a much greater understanding of how things technically work in plant biology. But then it was just like trial and error, and if things work, then we use them, and if they don't, we don't. And so yeah, I didn't have a formal education in horticulture. It was more like just we ironed out the kinks just by figuring it out from scratch. Either it works or it doesn't.
I think that's the best way to learn, just the ins and outs. Did you ever use like essential oils or anything?
Oh yeah, I've used all that stuff.
Just
Nowadays I think the best thing to use is just really good teas. I spray my plants with teas, and it seems to do a really good job in just keeping them clean. And I don't, I haven't experimented with just spraying them with water and seeing if it's the same exact thing, but I think there's like for at least like lipids and waxes in brewed teas that will, kind of keep the plant protected and fed.
like that.
So yeah, I mean, my IPM these days, unless I'm dealing with something horrible, is basically just brewing teas and spraying them on.
Do you have any trick for people combating fungus gnats or thrips?
Yeah,
Just because they're
um,
blowing up right now.
yeah. What I've done for the fungus gnats is literally just I had a pretty bad infestation of fungus gnats last fall, and I was just dumping entire bottles of cinnamon onto the top of this of the plant, onto the top of the soil. So that seemed to work pretty well. I also like I'll boil uh, tobacco in water for like 15 or 20 minutes, and then I'll water with it. I've also had good results in watering with low levels of isopropyl.
Mm, those are
You know,
brilliant.
Dang.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know the chat is going to be grateful.
but you know what? I've found with the gnats is that in the old days when you had hot bulbs, they'd fly up to the bulb and then they'd fall down and stick to the plant. With the LEDs, they don't burn up in the bulb, so at least you don't get the gnats like stuck to your tops, and you're not trying to pick them off with a scissor when you're trimming.
That's the worst.
That it's like you just see dead gnats all over the floor.
Yes. That's like the worst feelings, I think, for a grower when you walk into your room and see stuff like that and you're like giving it your all and they still cinnamon, like you said. I think a lot of people don't know that trick though, and I'm so glad that you said that because it does work so well though for a lot of things. Like a lot of different insects seem to that knocks them out right away. Do you
Yeah.
ever use those sticky traps?
Oh yeah. Yep. I've, I've gotten them stuck to my head a million times. The
Oh my god.
worst.
Have you ever like face slimed yourself or anything walking?
Yeah, I've had like one with a 5 o'clock shadow stuck to the side of my head. Disgusting thing to come out.
These things are the worst to walk into. Uh, or you like grab them. Have like I don't know. They are a hot mess.
Before we go though, I did want to ask you, when you go to New York, are there any good food spots that you recommend?
Yeah, I like to go. I like to eat Chinese food in Flushing. Always a big fan of that, and I like to go. I have some weird Chinese restaurants I like that are in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. Authentic Chinese food, something that I people will argue with me, but you cannot get that quality of food in San Francisco or Los Angeles. So that's always high on the list. There's always. Uh, I'm a huge fan of Peter Luger, obviously.
Yeah.
Talked about that a lot. Um, Everything. Sometimes I just go get a bagel, and it just tastes amazing because I'm deprived of all these things out here. So yeah, anything I can't get out here is high on the priority list when I'm home.
Oh, that's good.
I want some of that in my life. We have no good food in
Yeah,
Colorado.
we have terrible food in Colorado.
Hor-
It's trash.
It's horrible.
They
God.
I
like
used to eat at the Four Seasons a lot in Denver. That was pretty good, but yeah, it's expensive to go out for like a $300 dinner every night.
Yeah, yeah. And like the only bagel spot that we have that's close is like Rosenberg's, and
oh,
and it's okay. It's Colorado bagel, you
just a
know.
normal.
That try to just kind of say it's like New York style, but it's like I don't know, man.
The hardest thing for me about not living in New York is being away from the food because like when I lived in New York, like you know 99% of everything in New York wasn't good enough. It was only like this one place for that and this place for that, and you have to go to a specialty place for everything. And so yeah, that all those um, all those things go out the window when you leave New York City, and it's rough. It's a rough adjustment.
That makes you just not want to leave.
Yeah, I gotta get out to New York and go experience all the things out there.
Me too. I need to
Yeah,
message you.
yeah. I'm pretty good at knowing my way around the food scene in New York. It's always been a
We're gonna
specialty.
hit up AJ and be
Yeah,
like, AJ, tell us where to go. Come show us.
we
Let's
need.
smoke some sour.
I
Yeah.
need it. I think that. Yeah, I think that I'm gonna have a little job up there, maybe starting in the summer, and I think that we should meet up. We should do something.
I
Yeah.
think I'm moving back there, so I think I'll be living there sooner than later.
That sounds amazing. I feel like it'll align. It's gonna align perfectly. Thank you so much, AJ, for everything tonight. So
All right,
kind of you.
my pleasure.
Well, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your evening. And we're going to put in the description of the show, I'll put all and anything that you would like me to put there. And we will also list off that if you need seeds.
Yeah. Where can people find you on
or
Instagram? What's your Instagram handle?
AJ Sour Diesel.
All right. Sweet.
Is there any
Simple.
is there any other handles or any other things that we can shout out for you, AJ?
I have another Instagram that I'm doing with Flower House called Get Sour, but I haven't posted anything there yet. Get.sour.
Get.sour. That is exciting. Me and OG Tyler are gonna get up on that.
Yeah, we are. We're gonna hustle some seeds for you.
All right, please do. Please do. Get the Frank Rizzo needs to get out there.
Yeah.
We don't really talk about Frank Rizzo, but another integral part of my childhood.
Well, listen, we can do another interview. The future is bright.
All right. Well,
Thank you, AJ.
Word. Thank you
Okay,
again,
guys.
man.
Yeah. Thank you. Talk soon.
Yes, sir.
Bye.
Peace.